everyone. I am Dr. Shanette Grant, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Leadership Plus with Dr. G. This is the podcast where we keep it real about what it takes to lead, grow, and inspire others to be their absolute best. And I get to be your host. Thank you for joining me. And of course, I want to remind you to go back and check out all of the other previous episodes because Leadership Plus with Dr. G is available on all of your favorite streaming platforms. I want you to I want you to subscribe, but I always ask that most importantly, you share with somebody who you know could benefit from some of the insights that are shared on this podcast. All right. Now, today's episode is especially for those of you who are leading from the middle of it all. Ooh, you are in the middle of it, thick and thin. So whether you are an executive at a nonprofit, whether you're managing teams inside perhaps large companies, or even just building a business from scratch, this episode is for you. Because today we're going to talk about the cost of carrying the vision. The cost of carrying the vision. You didn't know there was a cost? Those of us who are in the middle of it, we know that there is a cost. So let's be honest, right? But before you do so, before we dive in, why don't you go ahead and grab your coffee, grab your tea, or whatever it is that fuels your greatness so that we can dive on in and talk about the cost of carrying the vision. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to shift the culture, perhaps in an organization, or even trying to scale a business that many don't even fully understand yet, right? You and I know that carrying a vision is extremely heavy and it can be super stressful on the individual who's doing so. We often, we talk about leadership in this almost romantic kind of way. We romanticize, what leaders are, what they do, but we don't talk enough about the cost, right? That's involved in true visionary leadership. We don't talk about it enough. And that's why today we will. All right. I want us to think of the behind the scenes of visionary leadership and think about it as the invisible load that many of us are carrying. So the question for you today, I want to start out by asking the simple question: who holds you up when you're the one holding it all together, right? Who's holding you when you are charged and have taken on the responsibility to hold everyone up and to hold everything up in an effort to execute the vision? When you're the one who's setting the vision, right? Managing the morale, when you're the one who's keeping the doors open, and when you're the one who's still expected to smile for the camera or lead the next staff meeting without a glitch. Yep, that part, right? And more often than not, you are doing the most. And a lot of times you are the one with the least room to fall apart. Sounds familiar? I'm talking about those days when you are in your office and all you're thinking about is all the work that needs to get done. How are you going to get it done? And all you can do is just pace your office floor, right? You stare at the computer screen for hours on end, trying to finalize yet another round of budget adjustments, trying to make something out of nothing. And mind you, this is after you have had the biggest smile on your face in the staff meeting, probably a few hours earlier, as you delivered the "we've got this" speech. We've got this to staff, reassuring everyone about the next steps with the level of optimism that sort of mirrors when you're trying to dive into your favorite piece or your favorite slice of cake, right? That's how strong and how heavy the optimism was in that room when you told staff that, hey, we got this, we can do this. But deep down, you know that when you get into your car on your ride home that very day, when you close the door, all you can think about and all you remember is you pulling up in your driveway, because the drive home was just a blur. It was just a blur because the entire journey home, your mind was so preoccupied because all you can think about was, how on earth are you going to pull this off? How are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? I'm talking about those days or seasons when everyone is looking to you as the leader to lead, and you just keep wondering, okay, who's going to hold me up when I start to fall apart? That's the invisible load that I want to talk about today as part of this idea that there is a price to pay when we carry the vision. That's the part of leadership that we really ever post about. You never see someone's posting about, their harsh day or the roughness or the things that they deal with behind the scenes, because of course, in the public's eye, they might be considered even weak, right? That's the part of leadership that don't make the snap or don't make the gram. It never does. If you are a leader with a vision, especially if it is a bold, bold one, you've been there, I've been there, and I know that if you're sitting in those executive roles or if you're launching your own company or launching your own business, I know that you are carrying that weight at some point in your journey. You have carried that weight because I have too. It is the up at 2 and 3 a.m. in the morning, answering the emails at 1, the prep sessions while you're cooking dinner instead of focusing on your family, showing up to the pitch meetings with the tears barely drying from your eyes, because behind the scenes, you are struggling, you are breaking. Behind the scenes, you have a responsibility to carry this vision that is heavy. And while others just show up for execution, you're the one who actually has to carry it. And it doesn't matter, like I said, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you are a leader in a corporation, whether you're a nonprofit leader, it all comes with moments when you're giving your absolute all and no one understands what that all is costing you. And like I said, because we romanticize leadership, you're always met with, oh, you're so inspiring. You're such a great leader. But they don't see the 3 a.m. emails. They don't see you wide awake from 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. trying to figure out your next move. They don't see all of the therapy sessions that you're probably having to go to. They didn't hear the prayers that you keep praying. They didn't sit with the self-doubt, right, that nearly silenced you before you stood in front of the staff at the staff meeting. They don't see it. And I hate to say, for sisters like myself, especially Black women of color, first generation professionals, we also carry another layer to all of this, because we are not just managing operations or scaling visions, we're also carrying representation and simply do not want to disappoint. But nobody really talks about how draining that can be to our spirits. Nobody does. What is that one thing? Think about it. As you are hearing me talk, I know you can think of that one thing. You probably have many things, but I want you to think for a minute on that one thing that you are carrying, all in pursuit of the vision that no one else sees. You may have many, like I said, but I want you to focus on just one thing. Take a moment and I want you to just write it down. Write it down. You can create the long list later on, but just write it down. And the one thing I want you to do with that one thing that you just wrote down, I want you for a minute to simply acknowledge that it exists. I want you to simply acknowledge that it is a load. And even if you're only doing this to yourself, feel free to share it with whomever you want to. But even if you can only acknowledge that it is a load and that it exists, you've already started on your journey, right? This is the time for you to not pretend, just be truthful. No performance is needed, because you're sitting in a space with yourself, acknowledging the struggle that you're facing. All right? This is how we start to lead from a place of honesty, not just vision, right? Because when we are able to acknowledge the added responsibilities that come with carrying vision, and by the way, again, it doesn't matter whether you are doing this for yourself because you are laying the foundation and the bricks for your own dream as an entrepreneur, or you're carrying somebody else's vision in a traditional role, for example, as an executive in a corporation. The unseen investments, the sacrifices that you've made, the emotional strain that these things have had on visionary leadership, it's real. It is real. It is an expensive responsibility to bear. And it's the kind of expense that no one ever budgets for. You can't budget for it because I'm not talking about business expenses. I'm not talking about payroll or line items on spreadsheets. I'm talking about the emotional tax and the sacrifice that comes with carrying a vision most people don't even fully understand. Because whether you're leading within the system or building something on your own, there are costs that never show up on a budget, but they hit really hard. I'll never forget one of the toughest seasons of my career inside an organization. Here I am being handed a turnaround project, something that had been failing for years. Now I'm being asked to fix it, mind you, with no extra staff. In fact, I had to reduce staff, no extra money, not an ounce of additional grace, none, not an ounce of additional grace, just a bunch of expectations. And by the way, unreasonable expectations. What did I have to do? I got the team aligned. I pulled community together and we started together around the work. We started to pull people together around the work. And I found myself ways to stretch the resources. I poured in my nights, I poured in my weekends, I poured in my ideas. On the outside, it seems so much like a success story when you think about it. A success story was unfolding, but behind the scenes, I was being depleted. I was all smiles for the team. I was all smiles for the community because that was my role. I carried the vision. As the leader in the building, I carried the vision. But I would go home and wonder, how long was I going to be able to keep this up? And like I said earlier, this does not just happen when you're carrying somebody else's vision in an organization like I was. It happens when you're building your own, even as an entrepreneur, or scaling or building a small business, whatever that looks like. In your own business, the costs may look a little different, but make no mistakes. They're there. You believe so deeply in the vision that you have invested everything in it. The branding, the software, the travel, the coaching, every tool that you thought you needed to succeed. But guess what? Your first client didn't come the day after you launched, and neither did mine. You were making payments with personal savings and pouring into a dream before you even saw a dime of return. That is the weight of carrying the vision. There's this myth that sometimes floats around, especially in mission-driven spaces, because it is one, I believe it goes like, if you're passionate about something, or if you're passionate enough, rather, I think is how it is said, the money and support will follow. Well, sure. There's another one that says, if you lead with heart, the world will show up for you. Well, while I am a big believer and my life is an example of alignment, my life is an example of divine timing and intervention, I just want to keep it real for you because guess what? Purpose don't pay rent. Passion is not a payroll plan. And impact without infrastructure leads straight to burnout. Straight to burnout. I want to talk about burnout just for a minute now that I brought that up, because there's a moment in every visionary's journey when the excitement fades, when the adrenaline slows down, and when you're sitting in silence asking yourself, how on earth did I get here? You're exhausted, you're frustrated, you're maybe even a little bitter because you've put so much in and is getting nothing out. But let me say this as clearly as I can. Burnout is not just about tiredness. Burnout is emotional. Burnout is spiritual. It's emotional and spiritual exhaustion. And for leaders, it doesn't always look like collapse, by the way. Sometimes it shows up as overfunctioning. In other words, perfectionism, as that quiet resentment you're trying so hard or praying will go away. Burnout never screams at you. It typically sneaks in, sometimes dressed like dedication, because now you're overperforming. Burnout sometimes looks different in different contexts, but it's showing up in so many of us and in so many different ways. If you're in an organization, you might be taking on way too much, working through the weekends and always being on call because you're the one they count on. In the case of an entrepreneur, you're probably saying yes to every opportunity, over delivering for clients who, by the way, underpay, and constantly running on empty. But here's the truth. When you're a visionary, the line between sacrifice and self-neglect can really get very blurry. We tell ourselves all often that I'm just doing it for a while. It's just for a season. But let me ask you, how long has that season been for you? How long has that season been lasting? Because you carry the vision, you tend to normalize telling yourself that if I don't do it, it won't get done. You tell yourself things like, if I don't show up, people will think that I'm not committed. I'm not committed to what I'm building. And that's whether it is within an organization or on your own. But when you think about it, underneath all of that is really one core fear, I would say. It's the fear that if you stop even for a moment, everything that you've built might just fall apart. And that's the fear that drives those kinds of behaviors in you. You are afraid that if you don't show up, overcompensate, that everything will fall apart or somebody may misread your actions as not being committed. But here's what I need you to hear from me today. First of all, if your vision only works when you are working yourself to death, that is not a vision. That's a trap. Your vision has to be larger than you being in the room. You deserve to build something that does not depend on your exhaustion to survive. And some simple things for you to consider is think about anything that you are doing right now that someone else can be trained to do, or something that you can pass on to somebody else so that you can actually truly stay focused on the vision that you're carrying without burning out. I also want you to ask yourself, when was the last time you really took some time off, a full weekend, right? Completely off the grid. Think about the last time you said yes when you really should have said no. And this last one, I share the story often because my own daughter actually checked me on this. This is the one that many of us suffer from, but we're afraid to admit it. Being more afraid of disappointing others than we are of disappointing ourselves. Like I said, I got a personal check on that one from my then teenage daughter. And I want you to ask yourself, do you live in that space where you are more afraid of disappointing other people than disappointing yourself? Something for you to think about. In any event, now that we've gotten through the gloom and doom, because it feels gloom and doomy, right? Of what it costs to really carry the vision, I want to take a few minutes though to reframe the cost and shift our mindset from this idea of pressure to perspective. Why is that so important? Because carrying the vision isn't just about what it costs, it's also about what it creates. It's about moving from loss and sacrifice to a place of purpose and legacy. I know so far we've talked about the invisible load, the emotional and financial stress, what burnout actually looks like in real time. But now I want to pause for a minute and I want to help you and help us to kind of zoom out. Because sometimes when we're so deep in the work, when our back is up against the wall and we're trying to hold it all together, we tend to forget something very important. That cost that we're paying is not always a loss. It's not always a loss. Sometimes it's the very thing that is shaping our calling. Think about it from that perspective. Sometimes it's not always a loss, but sometimes that cost is the very thing that is shaping our calling, shaping our purpose, and where we are going to end up. Every visionary pays a cost. Every visionary pays a cost. You will lose some things. You will feel the weight of decisions, right? Others don't even have the courage to make. And no, there are no guarantees that the rewards will be immediate. That's the frustration also. But that's the difference, though, between performing and planting. You are planting legacy in soil that doesn't always show results on your timeline. And I know that can be hard for many of us to hear. That was hard for me to learn. Planting legacy in soil that sometimes won't show results on my timeline. Some of the most transformational leadership you'll ever exercise won't be celebrated in real time. You'll be building, you'll be innovating, you'll be restoring, and the fruit may not come from months, years, and God forbid, even generations. And sometimes the return doesn't show up in the outcome, but sometimes it does show up in who we become. Let me say that one more time. Sometimes the return doesn't even show up in the outcome. It sometimes show up in who you have become. I don't want you to think of what you are pouring in as a sacrifice, because sacrifices are things that you give up without any kind of clarity, without any expectation of return. And sacrifice really does drain you, it depletes you. I want you to think of whatever it is that you're giving up as an investment. You know why? Because an investment is something that you give with intention, with expectation, and long-term vision, even when the payoff isn't immediate. So I'm going to ask you again, what are you carrying right now that might feel like loss, but it's really an investment in your next level? What are you releasing today that is actually making room for something bigger, something greater? And I want you to imagine the future version of you, of yourself, who has carried that vision, perhaps not perfectly, and perhaps with all kinds of pressures and stresses and mistakes, but with alignment, with wisdom, and with joy. You carried that vision. Just know and trust that even this current stretch is shaping you for where your vision is taking you. You don't need every answer right now, but you do need faith that nothing you've experienced is wasted if you are intentional in shaping your experiences. We've covered a little bit, quite a bit. We've covered the weight of carrying vision. We've covered the weight of visionary leadership. We've talked about the toll it takes on your energy, your finances, your spirit. And we've reframed the cost, not just as loss, but as legacy in the making, right? But let's be clear. Today, we're not going to just name burdens. We want to learn how to carry the vision a little differently, because visionary leadership should grow you, not consume you. It should grow you, not consume you, not burn you out. And I want to remind you, I want you to remind yourself that, first of all, you are not a machine. You are the architect. Okay? You are not the machine. You're the architect. You're the crafter. You're the holder of that vision. Your job is to design. Your job is to create alignment. Your job is to create structures that will build, and your job is to refine. It's not to burn out. It's not to prove your worth, and it's not to play martyr. And if you find yourself doing that, I want you to pay attention, because if you're in an organization, your vision isn't meant to live and die on your desk. It must be shared. It must be supported. It must be sustained. And if you're an entrepreneur, your business is only as healthy as you are. And if you're leading from fumes, your vision will stall. That's a fact. You can either lead from overflow or you can lead from fumes, but only one of those is sustainable. You're not going to be able to have both. Today, I want to give you a couple of tips for carrying the vision differently, so it doesn't burn you out, but instead it grows you. Tip number 1, I want you to build your circle. Notice I didn't say network. There's a place for network, but this is not the network conversation today. Build your circle, not just your network. A network is there to applaud, right? And to clap for you. That's what a network does. A circle checks in on you. You don't need more people impressed by your grind. You don't need more people, who just want to celebrate how amazing you are. You need people who are invested in your well-being. I want you to ask yourself in this moment, who are 3 people in my life who don't need my business card, but they know my heart. They know what I'm trying to do. They know the legacy I'm trying to create. They know and understand why the vision I'm carrying is important to me. Your legacy doesn't require a stage. It requires safe spaces so that you can be your authentic whole self. And your circle is where you can be that person. I want you to rest. Tip number 2, like it's ROI, right? I'm going to call ROI return on intention. Rest is not a reward for finishing the work. It's a requirement for doing the work well. You need to block out time, create no meeting days on your calendar. Take time before you crash. Listen, even God rested after creation. So who exactly are you trying to impress? We treat rest all the time like it's a retreat. It's something we have to, we're rewarded with it. No. Rest is a requirement. It's supposed to happen. It isn't a retreat. It's actually preparation. It helps to sharpen our instincts. It protects your passion and it restores your vision. So every now and then, when the tired and the weary kind of chips away at you, if you don't build an intentional rest to make sure that you can show up authentic, show up ready, you're going to be in trouble. And the last tip I want to give you is I want you to revisit your why often, weekly if you can, because mission drift is real, especially when you're in spaces where, the expectations are off the charts, high expectation, high capacity leadership spaces. Mission drift is real. And sometimes the fatigue, or you're going through fast growth, on the other hand, you can forget why you started or why you were holding this vision in the first place. And again, this does not align only to working in an organization. It could be your own business. Because if you don't create a rhythm where you spend time weekly, take a few minutes, journal, whether it's in your praying, whether it's in your meditation, think about your why and ask yourself these questions. Why am I still building this? What am I still working towards? Ask yourself that question often. Be reminded often. And then after you have answered that question, I want you to think about whether or not you truly, truly believe that this week's work actually reflect that why. And finally, I want you to ask yourself if you're making room for purpose, not just chasing productivity, right? Not just getting the work done, but really think through very purposefully. What is it that you are doing? Why are you doing it? Why are you carrying the vision? What was the original intent? Because when your why is clear, your no's get real easy. And you start to strategize, because now your strategy will become even sharper. Shift from carrying everything to carrying the things that matters. Not just more stuff, but just better. You're just going to do it better, because your vision deserves a leader who's whole, who's well, and who stays focused, right? It deserves a leader who is whole, who's well, and who stays focused. Carrying the vision will always come with a cost, but it should never cost you. It will always come with a cost, but it should never cost you. You weren't called to suffer. You were not called to suffer. You are called to steward the vision with strategy, with sustainability, with soul, so that you can create lasting impact. So I want you to always ask yourself today, as you're listening to this podcast, how will I carry my vision differently so that I don't burn out, so that I can actually fulfill that which I started with, right? What was my why? What was your reason? And I want you to think today, start asking yourself, how will I carry my vision differently? So that's today's episode. Y'all know, I hope something that you heard today spoke to you, spoke to your spirit, spoke to your heart. And basically, I hope that it challenged the way that you lead. I hope it challenged the way you serve. And I hope it challenged the way you show up for your vision. Because if it did, I want you to, first of all, I keep mentioning, share this with somebody else, send it to a fellow leader who might be carrying more than they let on, because sometimes you don't even know. See where that circle comes in? Perhaps you are a part of somebody's circle, right? Not the network. Perhaps you are a part of somebody's circle and you know that they're carrying a vision, but they're carrying it in the wrong way. And this episode is intended to help them refocus and shift back to where carrying the vision is not a sacrifice, but instead is an investment, because they're strategic and very thoughtful about how they carry that vision. So remember, share with somebody. And this is Leadership Plus with Dr. G. We like to keep it real because we want you to grow. We want you to lead with purpose, and we want you to inspire others. So until next time, continue to lead unorthodox, and we'll see you again. Ciao.